Millions in the bank couldn't buy her a working spine, but Victoria learned the hard way that wealth only attracts predators. When a desperate single father walked into her fortress, his simple reaction to her wheelchair didn't just shatter her icy exterior, it unraveled a multi-million-dollar conspiracy threatening her life. Rainwater hammered against the cracked windshield of Liam Gallagher's aging Ford F-150. He stared at the glowing GPS screen, his knuckles white around the steering wheel. Beside him, strapped securely into her booster seat, 7-year-old Chloe was fast asleep, clutching a frayed stuffed rabbit. Liam let out a long, ragged exhale. He was a master architectural restorer, a man who could coax life back into a 100-year-old crumbling estate. But he couldn't fix the crushing mountain of medical debt his late wife had left behind. 2 years of fighting pancreatic cancer had drained their savings, their home equity, and almost Liam's spirit. Today was supposed to be his lifeline. A private, emergency contracting job at a sprawling Mercer Island estate had fallen into his lap. The pay was exorbitant enough to clear his immediate debts and keep the bank from foreclosing on his small condo. There was only one massive complication. Mrs. Gable, his reliable elderly neighbor and babysitter, had slipped on wet leaves that morning and sprained her ankle. With zero alternatives and a strict do-not-be-late mandate from his new client, Liam had no choice but to bring Chloe to the job site. Pulling up to the iron gates of the Sterling estate, Liam lowered his window and buzzed the intercom. The gates parted silently, revealing a winding driveway flanked by towering evergreens and manicured, though imposing, grounds. The house itself was a modern monolith of glass, steel, and slate. It didn't look like a home, it looked like a high-tech fortress. "Stay close to me, Bug," Liam whispered gently, unbuckling his daughter as they parked near the grand entrance. "Don't touch anything, and keep your coloring book ready. Daddy needs this job." Chloe rubbed her sleepy eyes and nodded, slipping her small hand into his calloused one. They were greeted at the massive frosted glass doors by an older, severely dressed woman holding a tablet. This was Beatrice Higgins, the estate manager. Her sharp eyes darted from Liam's heavy tool belt down to the small girl hiding behind his leg. "Mr. Gallagher, I presume," Beatrice said, her voice dripping with disapproval. "I was not informed that you operated a daycare service. Miss Sterling specifically requested 0 distractions. She is running a Fortune 500 company from her study." "I apologize, ma'am," Liam said, maintaining a polite but firm tone. "Emergency situation with my childcare. She's quiet, she won't be in the way, and my work will speak for itself. I was told the interior accessibility renovations were a disaster and needed immediate, discreet fixing." Before Beatrice could dismiss him, a low, mechanical hum echoed from the vast, minimalist foyer. A sleek, motorized wheelchair glided around the corner of a massive slate wall. Seated in it was Victoria Sterling, the 32-year-old billionaire CEO of Sterling Omnicorp. She wore a perfectly tailored silk blouse and dark trousers, her dark hair pulled back into a severe knot. Her face was striking but completely devoid of warmth, a mask carved from ice. Liam had read about her. A tragic car accident 5 years ago had paralyzed her from the waist down, right as she took over her late father's tech and real estate empire. Since then, she had become a notorious recluse, fiercely private and notoriously ruthless in business. Victoria stopped the chair a few feet away, her piercing blue eyes locking onto Liam. She was accustomed to the reactions. The sudden widening of the eyes, the uncomfortable shifting of weight, the forced smiles, and the pathetic, cloying pity. She used her disability as a filter. She could tell exactly what kind of person someone was by how they looked at the chair. "You're the contractor," Victoria stated flatly. She noticed the child, but ignored her. "I have a board meeting in 30 minutes via satellite. I don't have time to coddle you." The last contractor was an imbecile who couldn't measure a turning radius to save his life. She paused, her chin tilting up defensively as she delivered her standard preemptive strike. "Sorry, I'm in a wheelchair. If the sight of it makes you uncomfortable, or if you plan on treating me like a fragile piece of glass, leave now." Liam didn't blink. He didn't offer a sad smile or a platitude. Instead, he dropped to one knee, bringing himself down. Victoria braced herself for the inevitable condescension. But Liam wasn't looking at her face. He was staring intensely at the expensive Brazilian hardwood floor, and the slight incline leading into the formal dining room. He pulled a small digital level from his belt, set it on the floor, and squinted. "I don't care about the chair, miss." "Sterling," Liam said, his voice completely level. He tapped the wood with his knuckles. "But I do care about this grating." The contractor who poured this subfloor didn't just mess up the turning radius. He created a 3-degree cross slope right before a marble drop-off. You aren't rolling over an inconvenience, you're rolling over a hazard. One wrong pivot, and you're going backward into that glass coffee table. Victoria stared at him, genuinely stunned. No one spoke to her like that. No one ignored her tragedy to point out architectural physics. And, Liam continued, standing back up and brushing the dust off his jeans, the transition strips are cheap aluminum. They'll warp under the weight of a motorized chair within a month. I'll need to rip up about 200 square feet of this to do it right. Chloe peeked out from behind Liam's leg, looking directly at Victoria. "Your chair is really shiny," the little girl said softly. "It looks like a spaceship." For a fraction of a second, the icy mask slipped. A tiny, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of Victoria's mouth betrayed her amusement. "It's custom," she told the girl smoothly, before snapping her gaze back to Liam. "Rip up whatever you need to, Mr. Gallagher. Just fix it." Over the next 4 days, the sprawling glass fortress echoed with the sounds of Liam's meticulous work. He arrived at dawn and left after sunset, methodically dismantling the disastrous upgrades the previous firm had installed. True to his word, Chloe was a ghost. She sat in a designated corner of the vast living room on a heavy canvas drop cloth, surrounded by crayons and coloring books, quietly drawing while her father worked. Victoria found herself distracted. Her home office overlooked the main living area, separated by soundproof glass. Instead of focusing on the quarterly earnings reports of Sterling Omnicorp, her eyes kept drifting down to the rugged, focused contractor and his quiet daughter. She watched Liam work with a quiet, intense dignity. He didn't take breaks, he didn't check his phone, and he certainly didn't try to schmooze her when she passed through the room. On the 5th afternoon, the heavy mahogany front doors swung open, and Simon Caldwell strolled in unannounced. Simon was Victoria's cousin and the chief operating officer of her company. Slick, impeccably dressed in a tailored Tom Ford suit, and radiating an oily charm, Simon was the face of the company's public relations. He had also been the one to hire the previous contractor. "Vicky, darling," Simon called out, bypassing Beatrice and walking straight into the living room. He stopped short, his Italian leather shoes nearly stepping on Liam's drop cloth. He looked down his nose at Liam, who was covered in sawdust, measuring a new threshold. "Who is this? And why is there a child on the floor of a $50 million home?" Victoria wheeled out of her office, her expression instantly hardening. "Liam is fixing the mess your people left behind, Simon, and the child is none of your concern." Simon laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "My people were top tier, Victoria. You just have impossible standards. It's a wheelchair, not a hovercraft. There are bounds to what architectural modification can achieve without ruining the aesthetic of the house." He glanced dismissively at Liam. "Try not to scuff the wainscoting, pal." Liam didn't look up from his tape measure. "Hard to scuff it when it's already pulling away from the drywall due to moisture rot, pal. Your top-tier guys didn't seal the exterior vapor barrier." Simon's jaw tightened. He shot Victoria a forced smile. "I just came to drop off the merger documents for you to sign. Take care, Vicky. Be careful with these independent laborers." He tossed a manila folder onto a side table and strode out. When the heavy doors clicked shut, the silence in the room was palpable. Victoria sighed, rubbing her temples. "Forgive my cousin. He believes aesthetics trump functionality." Liam stood up, wiping his brow with the back of his arm. He walked over to the side table, picked up his water bottle, and took a long drink. He looked at Victoria, his brow furrowed in deep thought. "Miss Sterling, can I show you something?" "What is it?" "I need you to come with me to the East Wing, to the new custom elevator they installed for you." Curiosity piqued, Victoria steered her chair down the long hallway, following Liam. Chloe trotted a few paces behind them, holding her stuffed rabbit. They arrived at the sleek, brushed steel doors of the residential elevator that connected the ground floor to Victoria's master suite upstairs. You said your cousin hired the firm that put this in? Liam asked, his voice completely devoid of its usual calm. There was a tight, dangerous edge to it. Yes, Sterling Omnicorp uses them for our commercial builds. Simon insisted they handle my private residence. Why? Liam pressed the call button. The doors slid open silently. He knelt down at the threshold, pointing a heavy-duty flashlight into the dark gap between the elevator car and the floor landing. When I was checking the power loads for the new ramp sensors, I found an anomaly in the junction box, Liam explained, his eyes locking onto hers. So I started digging. The primary braking mechanism on this elevator car has been deliberately bypassed. Victoria felt a cold chill run down her spine. Bypassed? You mean it's faulty? I mean, it was disabled, Liam corrected her softly. And the secondary emergency catch, the one that stops a free fall if the cables snap or the hydraulics fail, has had its tension springs filed down. If you were to take this up to the second floor, and the main power experienced a surge, the car would drop. Victoria stared into the dark elevator shaft, the reality of his words washing over her. I thought they were just incompetent, Liam continued, his voice dropping to a whisper so Chloe wouldn't hear. The steep ramp by the glass table, the slippery aluminum thresholds, the disabled elevator brakes. Miss Sterling, these aren't bad construction mistakes. Someone didn't just botch a job. He stood up, towering over the machinery, but his eyes were filled with a protective urgency. Someone engineered these flaws on purpose. They're trying to make it look like a tragic accident. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. The fortress she had built to keep the world out had been weaponized against her. She thought of Simon's insistence on using his contractors, his constant remarks about her fragile state, and his desperation to push through the upcoming corporate merger. You're saying. Victoria's voice trembled for the first time since Liam had met her. I'm saying, Liam replied, stepping between her and the open elevator shaft, that someone wants you dead. And they wanted the wheelchair to be the excuse. Shock paralyzed Victoria, rooting her to the spot more completely than her severed spinal cord ever had. She stared into the dark abyss of the elevator shaft, the cool, stale air from the basement brushing against her face. The sprawling empire her father had built, the billions in assets, the glass walls surrounding her, none of it offered an ounce of protection. Her own cousin was orchestrating her murder, treating it like a line item on a corporate balance sheet. Liam reached out, his calloused fingers gently wrapping around the heavy steel door of the elevator, sliding it firmly shut. The heavy click of the lock seemed to break the spell, holding Victoria captive. Do you have proof? She asked, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous octave. The icy CEO was returning, replacing the vulnerable woman who had just stared her own death in the face. Liam nodded, pulling a rugged smartphone from his tool belt. I took high-resolution photos and video of the filed tension springs, the bypassed junction box, and the altered floor grating in the dining room. I also documented the serial numbers on the aluminum thresholds. They aren't architectural grade. They're residential cheap stock, designed to buckle. I can give all of this to the police. No, Victoria snapped instantly, wheeling herself backward a few inches. Not the police. Simon plays golf with the police commissioner. He donates millions to the precinct's benevolent fund. If we hand this over to local authorities, the evidence will conveniently disappear in an evidence locker, and Simon will know we are on to him. He'll just find another way, a faster way. She looked at Chloe, who was gently petting her stuffed rabbit. Oblivious to the lethal conspiracy unfolding a few feet away, Victoria's expression softened, a rare flash of genuine empathy crossing her features. Mr. Gallagher, you need to take your daughter and leave. Now. I will wire the full payment for the contract into your account immediately, along with a bonus for your silence. You've done enough. Liam crossed his arms over his chest, his broad shoulders framing the hallway. I'm not going anywhere, Miss Sterling. If I walk out that door, you're sitting duck. Simon already saw me here. He knows I'm pulling up the floors. If his contractors realize I've found their sabotage, they won't just come after you. They'll come after me to tie up loose ends. Victoria analyzed his face. There was no panic, no greed, only a hardened, pragmatic resolve. He was a man accustomed to fixing broken things, and right now her entire life was a fractured foundation. The merger? Victoria murmured. Connecting the dots aloud. Simon brought me the final paperwork today. Sterling Omnicorp is acquiring a massive robotics manufacturer. I've been fighting him on the restructuring terms. If I die before signing the revised bylaws, my shares default to the executive board's trust. Simon is the board chairman. He would take total control of a $70 billion entity. Motive, Liam said grimly. Now we just need the trap. Victoria pressed a button on her chair's armrest, summoning Beatrice. The stern estate manager appeared moments later, her tablet clutched to her chest. Beatrice, Victoria commanded, her tone brooking no argument. Take Chloe to the East Wing guest suite. Lock the reinforced doors. Turn on her favorite cartoons and order whatever she wants from the kitchen. Do not leave her side until I tell you it is safe. Beatrice blinked, her sharp eyes darting between Victoria and Liam. She didn't ask questions. Decades of loyalty to the Sterling family dictated her actions. She extended a gentle hand to the little girl. Come along, Chloe. We have a private screening room with unlimited popcorn. Chloe looked up at her father. Liam knelt, kissing her forehead. Go with Beatrice. Bug. Daddy has to finish working on the spaceship. Once the hallway was clear, Liam turned back to Victoria. What's the play, boss? We make Simon think he won, Victoria said, a cold, calculating fire burning in her blue eyes. But to do that, we need to force him to bring his saboteur back into this house. I need a confession, on camera, and I need him cornered where his money can't buy him an exit. Liam stroked his jaw, his eyes scanning the ceiling panels. The house's internal security system. Can Simon access it? Yes. He oversaw the installation. He likely has a backdoor feed to the cameras. Then I need to blind him, Liam said, turning back to the elevator. I'll create a localized loop on the security footage for this hallway and the living room. It'll show an empty house. Then I'm going to rewire this elevator. I'll reconnect the brakes, but I'll install a dummy relay. When you call him and tell him the elevator is making a strange grinding noise, he'll panic, thinking his trap is failing before he has his alibi set. He'll bring his guy back to fix it. Victoria nodded, a grim smile playing on her lips. And when they step inside to check their handiwork, I trap them in the box, Liam said, his voice hard, and we stream everything they say directly to your corporate legal team and the FBI cyber division. Heavy rain lashed against the towering glass walls of the Sterling estate, mimicking the storm brewing inside. It was 9:00 p.m. The house was bathed in low, ambient lighting, the shadows stretching long and menacing across the hardwood floors. Victoria sat in her study, her phone on speaker, her hands resting calmly in her lap. Simon, I'm sorry to call so late. The new elevator. It's shuddering violently. It stopped between floors for 10 minutes before dropping me back to the ground level. I don't feel safe. Through the speaker, Simon's voice dripped with manufactured concern. Vicky, my God, are you all right? I told you those new hydraulic systems can be temperamental. Stay exactly where you are. I'm calling Arthur right now. He's the lead engineer. We're coming over to look at it personally. Thank you, Simon. The front gates will be open. Victoria ended the call. She looked over her shoulder. Liam was hidden in the darkened alcove of the study, a laptop glowing faintly in his lap. He had successfully hijacked the house's localized network. To Simon's phone, the security cameras showed a quiet, empty foyer. In reality, Liam had rigged 3 hidden GoPros in the ceiling vents directly above the elevator landing. They took the bait, Victoria whispered. 20 minutes, Liam replied, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I've overridden the elevator's master control board. Once they step into the car, the doors will lock on a manual override that only I control. The ventilation will stay on, but they'll be in a steel cage. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every creak of the house settling sounded like a gunshot. Victoria realized she wasn't just relying on a hired contractor. She was trusting the stranger with her life. He hadn't flinched. He hadn't asked for a bigger payout. He just saw a broken foundation and stepped in to brace it. Headlights swept across the frosted glass of the front entrance. Heavy footsteps echoed in the foyer. Vicky? Simon's voice called out, echoing off the slate walls. I'm in the study, Simon, Victoria called back, her voice projecting the perfect blend of annoyance and vulnerability. She wheeled herself out into the main living area, stopping near the edge of the newly repaired flooring. Simon emerged from the hallway, followed closely by a hulking man in a heavy canvas jacket carrying a reinforced tool bag. Arthur, the hitman hiding behind a hard hat. "This is unacceptable," Simon declared, shaking his head. "Arthur is going to do a full diagnostic." He looked around, his eyes narrowing. "Where is that dusty contractor you had lingering around?" "I sent him home," Victoria lied smoothly. "His child was giving me a migraine." Simon smirked, visibly relaxing. "Good. Let the professionals handle this." He gestured to Arthur, who walked straight to the elevator doors. Arthur pressed the button, and the brushed steel doors slid open. The lights flickered inside, a touch Liam had added for theatrical effect. "Get in, Arthur." "Let's see what the hell is wrong with the sensor," Simon barked. Arthur stepped into the car, dropping his heavy bag. Simon, driven by his own anxious need to ensure the murder weapon was still viable, stepped in right behind him to look at the control panel. From his hidden vantage point, Liam pressed the enter key on his laptop. Clang. The heavy steel doors slammed shut with violent, deafening force. The metallic echo rattled the glass windows of the living room. Inside the elevator, Simon jumped back. "What the Arthur? Open the door!" Arthur hit the open button. Nothing happened. He slammed his fist against the panel. The lights inside the car snapped off, leaving them illuminated only by the faint red emergency glow. Through the thick doors, Victoria wheeled herself closer, her heart pounding but her face a mask of absolute authority. She pressed a button on a small remote Liam had given her, activating the two-way intercom wired into the elevator. "Is there a problem, Simon?" Victoria's voice filtered cleanly into the trapped car. "Vicky! The door's jammed! Tell your security detail to get the manual pry bars!" Simon shouted, panic finally bleeding into his polished facade. "I can't do that, Simon," Victoria said, her voice dropping the facade. "Because my contractor didn't go home. He spent the last 6 hours documenting how Arthur bypassed the primary brakes and filed down the emergency tension springs." Dead silence fell over the intercom. Inside the box, the reality of the situation crashed over the two men. Simon lunged for the intercom. "Victoria, you're being paranoid. It's a malfunction. You're crazy." "I'm a lot of things, Simon," Victoria replied coldly. "I'm paralyzed. I'm ruthless. I'm currently recording this conversation and streaming it simultaneously to the FBI field office in Seattle and my executive board. But I am not crazy." "You have nothing," Simon screamed, his fists pounding on the reinforced steel. "It's a construction error. You can't prove intent." Actually, a new voice crackled over the intercom. Liam stepped out of the shadows, walking up to stand beside Victoria's wheelchair. "I can." Because the serial numbers on those cheap aluminum threshold strips you used to create a wheelchair hazard match the purchase orders Arthur made through a dummy corporation. A corporation entirely funded by your offshore accounts. Arthur turned on Simon inside the dimly lit car, his voice a low, furious growl. "You said she was clueless. You said the contractor was a nobody." "Shut up, Arthur," Simon hissed, but the panic in his voice was absolute. "Victoria, listen to me. We can make a deal. The merger—" "The merger is dead," Victoria interrupted, her tone finalizing the execution of his career and his freedom. "And so is your time at Sterling Omnicorp. The police are already through the front gates. The lock on those doors will release when they have you in handcuffs." Outside, the red and blue flashing lights of law enforcement vehicles finally pierced through the heavy rain, casting a chaotic, triumphant glow across the glass fortress. Detectives swarmed the grand foyer, their heavy boots tracking Seattle mud across the pristine slate tiles. The storm outside raged on, but inside the glass fortress, a different kind of tempest had finally broken. Handcuffs clicked sharply over Simon's tailored suit cuffs. He was no longer the suave chief operating officer. He was a cornered, desperate man, his face flushed red with rage as two officers hauled him out of the elevator. Arthur, the hired muscle, went quietly, his eyes fixed firmly on the floor. "You think this changes anything, Victoria?" Simon spat, twisting against the officer's grips as they dragged him toward the frosted glass doors. "The board already thinks you're weak. The moment this hits the press, Sterling Omnicorp stock will plummet. You don't have the stamina for a proxy war from a Permobile F5 wheelchair. Vanguard and BlackRock will rip the company out from under you by morning. Victoria watched him go, her expression unreadable. She didn't offer a dramatic parting line. She simply let the heavy mahogany doors swing shut, cutting off his frantic shouting. The sudden silence in the vast living room was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of the rain against the skylights. Liam stood near the center island of the kitchen, quietly packing his diagnostic tools back into his battered leather bag. He didn't intrude on her moment. He treated the takedown of a billionaire executive with the same quiet efficiency he applied to leveling a subfloor. "Mr. Gallagher," Victoria called out, her voice slightly hoarse from the adrenaline crash. Liam looked up, zipping the bag closed. "Police said they'll need a formal statement from me tomorrow. I gave them the hard drive with a security loop and the structural photos." Victoria wheeled herself toward him, her state-of-the-art permobile chair gliding smoothly over the section of floor he had already fixed. She stopped inches from him. "You saved my life tonight. The wire transfer for your contract, plus the bonus I promised, has already cleared your account. It's enough to pay off your medical debts, secure your condo, and put Chloe through college. You are free to go." Liam pulled his phone from his pocket, glanced at the banking notification that had silently appeared on his screen, and sighed. He didn't look thrilled, he looked burdened. "I appreciate the generous compensation, Miss Sterling. It changes my life. But I'm not leaving." Victoria raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "I signed a contract to fix the accessibility hazards in your primary residence," Liam stated flatly, pointing toward the torn-up section of the dining room. "I'm a craftsman. I don't leave a job half-finished, especially not when the homeowner has to navigate around exposed floor joists. Give me a pot of black coffee. I'm finishing the dining room grading tonight." Before Victoria could argue, Beatrice descended the grand staircase, holding Chloe's hand. The little girl was rubbing her eyes, clutching her stuffed rabbit, completely oblivious to the felony arrests that had just occurred. "Daddy?" Chloe mumbled, walking over to Liam and hugging his leg. The movie finished. Liam crouched down, smoothing her messy hair. "I know, Bug. Daddy has to work late. Just for tonight. Can you sleep in the fancy guest room with Beatrice?" Chloe looked at Victoria, then back to her father, and nodded. "Okay. Good night, spaceship lady." Victoria felt a strange, unfamiliar tightness in her chest. "Good night, Chloe." As Beatrice led the child back upstairs, Victoria turned to Liam. He was already pulling a fresh stack of Brazilian hardwood planks from his truck outside. She watched him for an hour, mesmerized by the rhythmic, purposeful movements of a man building something meant to last. But Simon's parting words gnawed at her. "Vanguard and BlackRock will rip the company out from under you." She pulled her custom tablet from its holster and accessed the secure executive server. Her blood ran cold. Simon hadn't just been planning a murder. He had built a corporate dead man's switch. Buried in the metadata of the upcoming robotics merger was a contingency clause. If Simon, the board chairman, was incapacitated or removed under duress, it automatically triggered an emergency vote of no confidence against the CEO, citing her ongoing medical vulnerabilities. The board meeting wasn't canceled. It was moved up. Tomorrow morning at 8:00 a.m. He rigged the boardroom too, Victoria whispered to herself. Liam, measuring a cut on the miter saw, paused and looked over. "Problem?" "Simon's final trap," Victoria said, her voice tight. "He structured an emergency vote. The board of directors is packed with his cronies. They will use the scandal of his arrest and my supposed fragility to strip me of my voting rights at dawn. If I don't show up to the downtown headquarters and prove I am in absolute control, they will dismantle my father's legacy." Liam set his pencil down. "Then you show up and prove them wrong." "My custom transport van is in the shop," Victoria admitted, the frustration finally leaking into her voice. "Simon arranged that yesterday. Claimed it needed an engine overhaul. I am essentially grounded here until my security team can source a handicap-accessible armored vehicle, which won't happen by 8:00 a.m. Liam looked at his muddy, 10-year-old Ford F-150 parked in the driveway. He looked back at Victoria, his eyes sparkling with a dangerous, defiant humor. "Miss Sterling," Liam said, wiping sawdust off his jeans. "How do you feel about riding shotgun in a beat-up pickup truck?" Dawn broke over Seattle, casting a harsh, pale light over the city's towering skyline. At the Sterling Omnicorp headquarters, a 70-story monument of glass and steel, the atmosphere in the executive boardroom was electric with greedy anticipation. 12 board members sat around a massive mahogany table. At the head of the table, an empty chair awaited Victoria. It was 7:55 a.m. "It's a tragic situation," Richard Vance, a senior board member and Simon's closest ally, announced with mock sorrow. "But we must protect the shareholders. Victoria's condition has clearly made her a target, and the trauma of last night's home invasion, well, she is medically and psychologically unfit to lead the merger. We will vote to place the company in a blind trust under my direction." "I wouldn't count my shares just yet, Richard." The heavy double doors of the boardroom swung open. Victoria Sterling rolled into the room, her posture impeccably straight, dressed in a sharp, slate-gray Armani power suit. Her face was the familiar, terrifying mask of ice. But the board members weren't just staring at her, they were staring at the man walking directly behind her. Liam Gallagher looked entirely out of place in the realm of high finance. He wore clean, dark jeans, work boots, and a rugged canvas jacket. Yet, he walked with the quiet, imposing authority of a man who owned the ground he stood on. He pushed the doors shut with a heavy thud, crossing his arms and leaning against the wall, his eyes scanning the executives like he was inspecting a termite infestation. "Victoria," Richard stammered, standing up, "we didn't expect. Your transport was down." "I found alternative transportation," Victoria said smoothly, pulling her chair up to the head of the table. "And a new head of security and infrastructure design. Mr. Gallagher here has a keen eye for finding rot in the foundation." She tossed a thick manila envelope onto the center of the mahogany table. "That," Victoria announced, her voice ringing with absolute authority, "is the full police report, the FBI Cyber Division's preliminary findings, and a paper trail linking Simon Caldwell's offshore accounts to the sabotage of my private residence. Furthermore, there is a signed affidavit proving that 2 members of this board, Richard, I'm looking at you, facilitated the dummy corporation used to buy the materials." The color drained from Richard's face. The other board members began whispering frantically. "The vote of no confidence is canceled," Victoria continued, leaning forward, "because anyone who supports it will be named as a co-conspirator in an attempted assassination plot. Instead, we are voting on the immediate termination of Richard and his allies, and the restructuring of the robotics merger under my sole discretion." She looked around the room, her piercing blue eyes daring anyone to challenge her. "Sorry, I'm in a wheelchair. But my mind works perfectly fine, and my company will no longer tolerate parasites. All in favor?" The hands shot up so fast the air in the room seemed to shift. Victoria allowed herself a tiny, triumphant smile. She glanced back at Liam, who gave her a slow, respectful nod. By noon, the bloodless coup was complete. The traitors were removed, the stock stabilized, and Victoria's absolute control over Sterling Omnicorp was cemented in stone. Later that afternoon, the rain finally cleared, leaving behind a brilliant, sun-drenched Seattle afternoon. Victoria sat on the expansive back patio of her estate, sipping a cup of artisanal tea. The sliding glass doors opened with a smooth, effortless glide thanks to the new tracks Liam had installed before dawn. Liam walked out onto the patio, carrying a clipboard. Chloe skipped happily beside him, holding a brand new, highly detailed architectural sketchpad. "The interior transitions are fully flushed," Liam reported, tapping his pen against the clipboard. "No more 3-degree slopes. You could roll a marble from the foyer to the kitchen, and it wouldn't deviate an inch. Job's done, boss." Victoria set her teacup down. She looked at the man who had shattered her protective glass walls, not with a hammer, but with simple, unyielding decency. He had seen past her money, past her chair, and past her icy exterior, choosing to fix what was broken instead of exploiting it. "Your contract for this house is finished, Mr. Gallagher," Victoria said softly. "But Sterling Omnicorp owns over 200 commercial properties globally. My accessibility designs are, frankly, archaic. I need an executive director of accessible architecture, someone who isn't afraid to rip up the floorboards and tell me when I'm wrong. Liam paused, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. He looked down at Chloe, who was busy drawing a picture of a shiny spaceship. The pay better be good. I've got a kid to put through college. The pay is exorbitant, Victoria replied, a warm, completely unicy smile finally reaching her eyes. And childcare is provided on site. For the first time in 5 years, Victoria Sterling wasn't just surviving in a fortress. She was finally building a home. Did Victoria's brilliant boardroom takedown leave you speechless? Or did Liam's quick thinking and protective instinct steal the show? We'd love to hear your favorite twists in the comments below. If you enjoyed this intense story of betrayal, resilience, and rebuilding against all odds, please hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, real-life inspired audio dramas every week.